I'm Diane Macedo. We're coming on the air with breaking news about President Biden's son, Hunter Biden. ABC News is learning he has reached a deal with federal prosecutors to plead guilty to 2 minor tax crimes and admit to the facts of a gun charge. That's according to court papers filed Tuesday. The terms would likely keep him out of jail. The Department of Justice has been navigating a politically sensitive investigation involving Hunter Biden's business activities. The charges relate to his taxes and whether he lied about his drug use on a gun application form in 2018. This investigation was led by the U.S. attorney in Delaware, appointed by former President Trump and kept on the job by President Biden and the Biden administration. The investigation does not involve President Biden. I want to get right to our Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, with more on this. Pierre, you have that court filing in front of you, so walk us through the details of this deal.
Diana, well, the Justice Department and attorneys for Hunter Biden have reached an agreement that would end the long-running federal investigation into his personal and professional life, according to a new court filing just reviewed by ABC News. The plea deal calls for Biden to plead guilty to a pair of tax-related misdemeanors in exchange for probation, which will allow him to avoid serving time in prison if the deal is approved by a federal judge. The deal, which was negotiated by the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, David Weiss, a Trump appointee, also includes a pretrial diversion for 1 felony count related to Hunter Biden's illegal possession of a firearm, meaning that prosecutors would agree to drop that charge if Biden adheres to certain terms of a program such as no illegal drug use. Sources close to Hunter Biden believe that this will end the more than 5-year investigation that has dogged Hunter and his father, both men accused of corruption, as critics have focused on Hunter Biden's business deals in Ukraine and China.
And I want to bring in ABC's chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, on this. Mary, the president obviously has talked a lot about his close relationship with his son. Any reaction from the White House on this?
Yeah, well, no reaction yet, Diane, but we do know that over recent years and months, the White House, the Biden administration, has often tried to distance themselves from this investigation, not commenting on it, simply instead referring to the Justice Department. But I have to say, the president has been emphatic that he believes that his son Hunter did not break the law, that he did nothing wrong. We know that Joe Biden is extremely protective of his family, and he is also deeply proud of his son. I think it has pained the president to see his son but be used to launch political attacks against him for so many years now. And this president has also been very open about the very real struggle that his son has faced with addiction, which is, of course, at the center and linked to some of this investigation. He has said that Hunter, like so many American families, like so many in this country, has grappled with addiction on and off for much of his adult lifetime. And I think to see the president use what has been for him a struggle that now he's very proud of his son for having gotten through that, to see that be something that has been tried to use to launch political attacks against him has been very difficult, I think, for this president personally to watch. And Diane, we do have to say that while we are learning more about, what the president's son here, is being accused of and what has been reached here, the accusations that have been at the center of this, the accusations that Hunter has traded on family connections, that he seized on his business dealings to Ukraine. Those are the things that Republicans have tried to use to harm Biden Sr., to harm the president. The issues that Republicans have seized on don't seem to be mentioned here.
I want to bring that point to ABC's chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams, joining us on the phone now. Dan, what does this deal tell us about this case, and what's not here, you think, that's notable? And what does it say, if anything, about those accusations about bribery, the laptop, Ukraine? What are we learning?
So I think you have to separate these really into 2 separate buckets here. One is this criminal investigation, which is initially what many Republicans were asking for. But once this investigation heated up, a separate issue arose as to what they're investigating, right? So let's talk about what this is. These are pretty technical violations. And I think it was always clear that Hunter Biden had not paid taxes for a couple of years. It was always clear that Hunter Biden had not been honest about drug addiction on a gun form. The question was, once you pay the money back, do you still get charged criminally? And on the gun form, do people really get charged just for that violation with nothing else? Those were the questions that they were grappling with. Those questions have now been resolved in the context of this agreement. They've reached an agreement. They're going to recommend probation. If the judge signs off on it, then that case is over. The questions about Burisma and Hunter Biden getting money from China and Republican investigations of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden with regard to money coming from abroad, those are entirely separate issues and investigations. And those in the last, 6 months to a year have become much more important to Republican leaders than this criminal investigation.
Dan, we're also now getting in a statement from Hunter Biden's attorney saying in part, it's my understanding that the 5-year investigation into Hunter is resolved. Hunter will take responsibility for 2 instances of misdemeanor failure to file tax payments when due pursuant to a plea agreement, a firearm charge, which will be subject to a pretrial diversion agreement and will not be the subject of the plea agreement, will also be filed by the government. He says, I know Hunter believes it's important to take responsibility for these mistakes he made during a period of turmoil and addiction in his life. He looks forward to continuing his recovery and moving forward. I want to focus on that part saying, this 5-year investigation into Hunter is resolved. Does that mean all of it is resolved?
No. So from the Hunter Biden team, and probably most Democrats, in particular those close to Joe Biden, they're going to try to move forward and say, okay, we've addressed this. Hunter Biden has taken responsibility. It's time to move forward. I promise you're going to hear Republicans say, particularly in the Oversight Committee, this doesn't address. That's interesting and that's important, and they're going to criticize Hunter Biden, but they're also going to say, but this doesn't go to the heart of our investigation of the Biden family. So you're going to see 2 very different narratives here. One from the Biden family and those close to Joe Biden who are going to say he's accepted responsibility. This has been the 5-year investigation. It's time to move forward. And you're going to hear, Oversight Committee members and some other leading Republicans say that, no, that doesn't relate to our investigation of, where certain money came from. Because remember that part of the tax crime here was for not reporting money he was getting from overseas. And what some of the leading Republicans would say is we still need to know a lot more about why that money was being paid, was there additional money being paid, et cetera.
I want to bring that point to our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl. John, this is not only a legal issue, it's also a political one. And President Biden is not only current president, he's also running again for 2024. So what's the big picture impact here?
Well, first of all, a couple of points. President Biden has said point blank, and this is an exact quote, my son has done nothing wrong. Now we see his own Justice Department concluding an investigation that, in fact, the president's son did do things wrong. He committed crimes both in his failure to pay taxes in 2017 and 2018. By the way, he eventually paid the money he owed. It was some $2 million that he paid in 2021, significant amount of tax liability that he did not pay. And secondly, he has now pleaded guilty to a firearms charge. So that's one point. But for the Republicans, this is just the beginning. As Dan said, there's the question of the earnings in the first place, his business dealings, quite lucrative business dealings in both China and Ukraine, getting paid millions of dollars. Why was he getting this money? What did he do in return? In the case of Ukraine, this is a story I remember covering while Joe Biden was vice president, asking about it in the White House briefing room. Why was the president's son, the vice president's son at the time, getting paid millions of dollars from a Ukrainian energy company? Is it because he was an expert in energy? I mean, there's no evidence that he has any expertise whatsoever in that field. Or was he trading on his name, and what else was this energy company getting? And as far as the Republicans are concerned, this is just the beginning. It's not even a matter of just Hunter Biden. It's the Biden family. I mean, there's the questions about the president's brother, James Biden, and his dealings with China. So I think you'll see this as a significant issue for Republicans on Capitol Hill going forward. They won't be satisfied in any way with this, and also a significant issue in the presidential campaign of 2024.
I want to bring in our senior investigative reporter, Aaron Katursky, on that, because, Aaron, the DOJ has been looking into all of those issues. So what do we know about their findings so far?
The findings only include these two relatively minor tax charges that Hunter Biden has now agreed to resolve, and one felony charge of making a false statement on his firearms application. And the charge is fairly simple, Diane. It says that on or about October 12th, 2018, Robert Hunter Biden knew that he was an unlawful user of a controlled substance and yet possessed a firearm anyway. Even though the Republicans will want to make a political case about China, Burisma, and other matters that have become almost conservative talking points on a campaign trail, a prosecutor that former President Trump appointed, that President Biden left in place, has now concluded none of those things seem to be chargeable. He has come up with misdemeanor tax charges for 2017 and 2018, money that, as John Karl notes, Hunter Biden has already paid back, and this one felony charge involving lying about being on drugs while possessing a firearm.
Pierre, for Hunter Biden, why take this deal, and could we see more charges in this case in the future?
Well, Diane, a couple things. Number one, Hunter Biden's attorneys are making the argument, and they believe that the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, David Weiss, has looked at all these matters regarding China, Burisma, Ukraine, all of them, and could not come up with a chargeable case. That is their belief. That is what you will hear them putting forth in the coming days, that the Justice Department, again, a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney investigating for 5 years, could not bring any prosecutable offenses. That is the position that they're going to take. In terms of Hunter Biden, sources are saying that he felt it was important for his own recovery to take responsibility for the actions that he did regarding the taxes, not paying the taxes properly, and also on the gun charge. He had a belief, according to sources, that, look, under normal circumstances, people in similar situations don't face criminal prosecution, particularly on the tax matters. Their position is that those people typically pay the fine and the matter is handled with the IRS and is done with. On the gun charge, typically the federal government is not charging individual charges like this. It's usually some other accompanying violent crime or other crime. So in that regard, he's willing to allow that charge or agree to allow that charge to be filed against him, not entering a plea on that if he does not get into trouble over the course of the next few years, assuming a federal judge, and again, we have to emphasize, assuming a federal judge approves this deal, then that gun charge would later be dropped.
And I want to bring in ABC senior congressional correspondent Rachel Scott with some of the politics here. Rachel, no doubt there will be large reactions to this from Washington on both sides of the aisle. What are you watching for?
Well, look, Diane, make no mistake about it. House Republicans have made this a #1 priority since the first initial day of the new Congress. They have centered their entire push around investigating not only President Biden, but also his family, specifically Hunter Biden. They have held hearings on this around his business dealings, and so they will likely not be satisfied by this deal. And we will likely only see the outrage start to grow as this starts to ripple throughout Capitol Hill. Lawmakers are expected to come back here to Capitol Hill later this afternoon. And so while the federal investigation appears to be wrapping up here, you can only expect the outcry from House Republicans to only increase as they try to demand more answers to see how this all played out behind the scenes. And of course, all of this is taking place against the backdrop of the 2024 presidential election, which is already starting to heat up. And we have seen Republicans make the case that they believe that the justice system is being weaponized, Diane.
So, Aaron, what's next? What happens now?
At some point, Diane, Hunter Biden's going to have to appear in federal court in Wilmington, Delaware, and a judge is going to have to sign off on this tentative agreement to resolve these charges, putting him effectively on probation for a couple of years, but avoiding going to prison over these tax and this gun charge. So at some point, we will see Hunter Biden in all likelihood in court. But otherwise, as far as his team is concerned, this matter is largely resolved. The politics, of course, are yet to come. But from a legal matter, it appears that Hunter Biden is going to be on probation, meaning if he keeps his nose clean for the next couple of years, these charges are going to be resolved.
I want to bring in our political director, Rick Klein, for some final thoughts here. Rick, given we are entering an election year here, what do you think the impact is of this deal?
I'm hearing from Republicans already saying two-tier justice system. They're equating the charges brought against Donald Trump with the lack thereof and the lack of accountability that they see in the Hunter Biden case, even though the cases are entirely different. It is striking to me. There was a poll from Fox News a couple months ago, Diane, that had almost as many people thinking that Hunter Biden committed the crime as think Donald Trump committed the crime out of that Manhattan case. Now, of course, Hunter Biden is not the one running for office. His father is. There are still pretty extensive efforts by Republicans on Capitol Hill and on the campaign trail to try to tie Joe Biden to his son Hunter through the business deals. But because they aren't in here, that doesn't mean it's going to go away. I'd anticipate that the Republican candidates are going to continue to make Hunter Biden a centerpiece of the argument against Joe Biden. And keep in mind, Joe Biden also has some lower tier Democratic challengers, primary challengers, some of whom have at least hinted around the edges around Hunter Biden. I'm interested to see if any of them pick that up when so many Democrats are rallying behind the president. This has always been something of a political liability for President Biden.
John, how big of a challenge is this for President Biden now?
Well, it's an enormous challenge given the Trump cases because you have these highly consequential prosecutions of Donald Trump, an indictment in the documents case and a continued investigation in the January 6th case. And the challenge for the Biden Justice Department and for President Biden is to reassure particularly independents and Republicans in this country that there is not an unequal system of justice, that this is not a case of Donald Trump being prosecuted, being investigated because he is a political opponent of Joe Biden, but because he has done something wrong. And so the test case will be, was this a legitimate, serious investigation of Hunter Biden? I think it is notable that you do have these guilty pleas here, 2 misdemeanors and a felony charge, a plea deal. It shows that the Biden Justice Department did bring a case against Hunter Biden. But the challenge here is Republicans are going to say that they didn't investigate the far more serious allegations sufficiently.
Terry, I want to bring in our senior national correspondent, Terry Moran, for just some final thoughts here. Terry, when you look back historically, how significant is this day?
It's big. Look, there have been a lot of relatives of presidents who have tried essentially to make money off of that relationship. That's what Hunter Biden stands accused of in the largest sense. What this indictment is are very specific violations of the law. A United States attorney for 5 years looked at this one individual. You don't want to be on the receiving end of that kind of scrutiny. And this is what it results. Misdemeanor tax charges and essentially a gun charge that is at the minor level. The question is the one that Pierre Thomas has asked, is this what the only thing that the U.S. attorney in Delaware, appointed by President Trump, was looking at? Over the course of 5 years, U.S. attorneys have a tendency to look wherever there might be wrongdoing, which then leaves the question for Republicans and Democrats and the country. Maybe there's a difference between what's legal and what's right. Hunter Biden may escape legal accountability, as might the president. The question before the country now is, was it wise for Joe Biden, when he was vice president, to be the Obama administration's point person on Ukraine when his son was buck-raking off his dad's name in that country? And those are the relationships also in China that the Republicans will continue to scrutinize and that will have political ramifications. But right now, these charges have got to be disappointing to Republicans who are looking for more out of Delaware.